guys, it's Kesara, and today I'm going to be talking about the best books of 2021. So before I get into my top 5 favorite books that I read in 2021, because this year I'm only doing top 5, guys, because I didn't read enough books this year to really do a top 10. So I'm only going to do a top 5. But before I get into it, I have to mention that I'm still currently reading that there is a good chance they would have been on this list if I had finished them before I filmed this video. So I should probably mention them. And that's The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie and J Legacy by Fonda Lee. Both of these books are 2 of my most anticipated releases of the year and are final books in trilogies that I enjoy immensely. So I think I'm gonna love both of these books and would probably end up being on this top 5 list and knocking some of these other books out. But unfortunately, I didn't finish them in time, so they didn't make this video, but I still absolutely love them. And if you want to know how I felt about these, you can check out my vlog that's going to be coming out very soon. So the first book that I'd like to talk about is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. So I actually don't remember this as much as I really wish that I did, because I read this like literally at the beginning of the year back in January. And while this is part of one of my favorite series of all time, this is actually probably my least favorite in the trilogy. So this is the 3rd book in the Poppy War trilogy, which I absolutely love, by the way. It's an Asian inspired high fantasy series that is dark and gritty, and I love every second of it. This one didn't quite do it for me as some of the other ones do. It's following a character named Rin, who in the first novel goes to this kind of like magic school, but is quickly thrust into this just gruesome war, and that's kind of where the rest of the series goes. And like I said, it's just so much action, but I think what I liked the most about this series was just the amount of emotional turmoil that the characters go through. The second book in the series, The Dragon Republic, is by far my favorite of the series, but I still really enjoyed the third novel in the series. Even though it was a little bit of a disappointment, it's still part of one of my favorite series of all time. I think it's one of those things, like, even if a novel is disappointing, a lot of people don't realize when you go into a novel, your expectations of that book definitely changes how you feel about it. Some of my favorite series of all time, I don't necessarily like every book in the series, but at the same time, they don't work without those books. And that's the case with this one. This series would not be anywhere near as good as it is without this book. Like, this book definitely makes the series better, but there's just so much that I really wanted from it also. And mind you, like, just because I was slightly disappointed in it, it doesn't mean that it's not a good book. Like, it was still an absolutely fantastic book. I just loved the first 2 books so much that I had just way too high expectations for this one. But the more that I think about it, just looking back on it, the more I end up liking this book also. I definitely do plan on rereading the series at some point in the future, and hopefully upon reread, when my expectations aren't so high, I'm gonna like this one even more than I do already. But honestly, it was still just a really satisfying conclusion to one of my new favorite series. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So this was actually the first book by Matt Haig that I picked up, and it made me absolutely want to read pretty much everything he's ever written. He has a very like contemporary sort of writing style that's very subtle, but like keeps the story at the front of your mind rather than the writing, which I enjoy that aspect of it so much. This novel is one of my favorite tropes of all time, which is parallel worlds. So in this novel, our main character Nora dies, and she has lived like this miserable life, and she ends up in this library between life and death. Every book in the library represents a decision that she made that she could have done differently, so she can go back and basically live without any regrets, going back and seeing what her life would have been like if she had made different decisions. I absolutely love the concept of parallel worlds and that different versions of us exist out there, and specifically this concept is really intriguing, that you can go back and relive your life after you've died and basically make up for any regrets that you had during your actual life. This novel definitely made me start thinking in a different way than I expected to. It started out as kind of like a really fun, just like interesting concept, but it kind of starts making you think in a different way of like how the choices that you make in life actually feed into how your life turns out, because her lives that she made different choices are completely different, and it's so incredibly interesting to see how her different kind of lives turned out. I loved every second of this book, like absolutely fantastic, and I definitely want to read more by this author. Really cool concepts. I actually ended up picking up another novel by him, How to Stop Time, which didn't make this list, but I also still really enjoyed. But this one is definitely by far one of my favorites of the year, if not all time. I loved it so much, and I definitely want to read more by this author. Definitely a new favorite of mine. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Sufficiently Advanced Magic by Andrew Rowe. So this novel I picked up on kind of a whim. I was in the middle of a little bit of a reading slump, and this 100% 100% got me out of that reading slump. I loved every second of this book, and I had never read this author before, so I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I didn't know anything about the book other than the title because I'd heard other people talking about it, and I was like, you know what? I have this in my library. Let me check it out and see what it's about. I loved it so much. It was super action-packed, and in this world, there's this spire in which there are like rooms that give challenges to the people that are entering the room, and in order to pass through, they have to pass the challenges, but it can be incredibly dangerous, and people can die or go missing in this tower, but it's a regular thing for them to do at different points in their lives for different reasons. So our main character, Corbin, is going into the tower in order to get an attunement, which gives them powers in the outside world, but he also has an internal motivation because his brother went into the tower a little while ago and never came out. So he's also looking for his brother in this tower. It's just super action-packed, and I loved every second of it. I loved all the action. I liked the complexities of the challenges. I like the characterization and the motivations for the character. I think it's just all around a very well-written story, and I loved every second of it. And also definitely really excited to continue on with this series. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Death's End by Cixin Liu. If you want to read epic sci-fi, this series is definitely the way to go. So this is the third novel in the Remembrance of Earth's Path series, and the reason why I say this series is like epic sci-fi is because the scope of this novel is just so huge. It's mind-blowing. Like, this author, by the way, I just absolutely love. I recently read The Wandering Earth by this author, which is a series of short stories, and he's just so creative, like so creative. I've loved everything that I've read by him, but this is probably my favorite novel of the bunch. I think what works so well for me in this series is that it's just so epic in scope, but it still makes you like feel in the moment with the characters while you're in there. So there'll be like different characters from like different time periods, and you're not sure how they connect. There's like tiny little details and interactions and things like that that happen throughout the story until you get to the end, and it's just like, wow, this is so cool. And the series explores some of the most interesting concepts in a very scientific way that I absolutely love. Highly recommend this series if you haven't read it. It's a really popular series, so I think most people have read it who are fans of sci-fi, but if you haven't, highly recommend. Really great series, and I definitely want to read more by this author in the future. Also, for those of you who don't know, this is actually a translated work. It was originally written in Chinese, so it has a lot of concepts that we don't really see in more Western fiction, so I think that's part of the reason why I love it so much also. And lastly, my favorite book that I read in 2021 is The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. So this is the third book in the Gentleman Bastard series, and yeah, I know it took me a while to get to this, but I finally got to it, and I loved every second of it. This was so good. Mind you, I was in like a massive reading slump for a good portion of this year, and this is like literally the only series that I could read during that time period. It got me through it. So I read both Red Seas Under Red Skies and The Republic of Thieves. I honestly like both of them a lot, but this one, I don't know, there was just something about it that just spoke to me in ways that I wasn't expecting. I mean, the Red Seas Under Red Skies, I'm including it in this best books of the year. Gentleman Bastards in general is the best series that I've read so far this year. First of all, gorgeous cover. Absolutely love that cover. But it's also the third book in a series, so I don't want to get too in depth into what was going on in this book in particular. But in general, this series is fantastic. It's following the characters of Locke and John, who are thieves, but it's following both when they're young and they're like basically children learning their craft, and then also when they're older, and we get to see kind of like all the political maneuvering and general like trouble that they get into, because they get into a lot of trouble. I absolutely love these characters. I love their relationships, not just of those two characters, but some of the other characters in like their band of thieves. I love everything about this series. It's just one of those series that like, it's so detailed in the best way possible, but you have to really like pay attention to all of those details to just understand how great this series is, because they tie in together so well. I love everything about the series. It's definitely one of those like new favorite of all time series that I'm probably going to be rereading over and over again for many years in the future, because it is just absolutely fantastic. So that's all I have for you guys. I post videos on Tuesdays and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.